Hi and welcome to Painting with Yuk-Sem. Today we're going to be doing an acrylic painting of Lakeside in the nice purples and blues. So I'm using acrylic paint, which means that I can use water to add to it. So I'm going to start right in with my deep blue. I'm going to cover the canvas in the corners to work my way towards the middle. So because I'm using acrylic paint, when I add water, it increases the coverage and it goes between all the lines in the canvas. So it's an easy way to really get that all the area covered really fast. So I'm using the big brush, and because we're going to be doing a reflection down here, what I'm going to do is come down here and add that same reflective color. So you can tell that it's a little bit hard to paint in the bottom of a canvas, so I'll show you one of the ancient tricks, is that if you do have to paint the bottom, all you have to do is flip it over, and then it's easy to get that area. Once again, going to get the blue and some water and get that coverage on there, especially down in the corners. It's much easier that way. And now that that's all painted, either you can leave it like that or flip it back so that this is the top. Without washing my brush, I'm going to go right into the violet, right into the purple, and just add it right on. So one of the techniques that I'm going to be using today is to go and add all of these colors and then bring the white in after to help it blend. So I want to work fairly fast because acrylic dries, so we have about maybe 10-15 minutes before the acrylic completely dries, and we won't be able to do too much blending. So if you were planning on taking a little bit more time, I would say to do the top and then go and work on the bottom after. So I still haven't washed my brush, and I'm going to go right into the magenta and just add some of that. You can see that the colors are blending. I don't even have to work at it. It's picking up some of that purple and some of the blue right off the bat. And doing the same down here. What I like about this technique is that it's really fast to get that background, the coverage on there. And now, because I'm going into the yellow, I am going to wash some of that dark color off, because otherwise it'll just turn into like a violet gray once I add the yellow to it. So I try and get quite a bit of that color out. And every time that I wash my brush, then I go and wipe some of it off onto the napkin. And if there's still color on the napkin, that's when you know that there's still quite a bit of color on your brush. So now I'm getting to the point where it's a lot less, which is what I wanted. A little bit of color right now, I'm not too worried about. So I'm going to add the yellow, but I'm not going to touch the red just yet, because that'll blend in after, but I want that yellow, at least for now, to stay that nice, bright, pure color. And then I'm going to start going into the white. I've just added it right to my yellow brush, and add that little area of light right there, which is going to be our sun, and work that down into where the reflection is. And now with some of that white, I'm going to go, so I have a little bit on my brush, and I'm going to start doing some crisscross motions with that white into the magenta. Every once in a while I'll go and wash my brush just so that I'm not over blending those colors especially around the edge here. So I'll bring them in and go over a little bit. But when I see that the color's too saturated and it's becoming too dark, I'll wash off my brush, go and get a little bit more white, come back in and come over it again. And then it should just start picking up some of those colors and blending them. Right like that. So now that I have that area done, I'm going to do the same with the bottom. A little bit of white into that yellow. And because it's a reflection in the water, I want it to be fairly horizontal, because the key to getting that nice water is to have those horizontal reflections. Just getting a lot of the areas covered. And now I'm going to clean my brush really well again, because this is one of the nice techniques, is that I'm going to come in and right where I have those two lines blending of the color between that yellow and the red, that's where I'm going to come in over it and start blending it even a bit more, a bit lighter, in order to try and get that blend. So I haven't added any paint yet. I'm just using the wet brush and the paint that's already on the canvas to start blending it over it. And now I'm going to pick up a bit of yellow and try and get that into a nice kind of range from the darker color coming into that white. My last one here, and then I'll just grab the white and come back over. And it's all a matter of blending and being able to take those colors and try and get them so that you don't see a definite line of where one color starts and the other one stops. And just to go out and sometimes over. Bringing some of the color in and some of that yellow out. That red's going to come in. And all you do is you keep on playing with those lines. And right now all I'm doing is getting the basic shape, and I can come in after with those highlights and the shadows and be able to really get some of those areas highlighted. So here I want a little bit more of that red, so I went and got some red, just adding it to it. Those nice horizontal lines. And now that I have the lighter colors done, I'm going to start going into the darker ones. So I got a little bit of that white again, but where the red meets the purple, that's where I want to start smoothing and blending those lines again. I picked up a little bit of the white, and I'm going to come, and my brush stroke this way picks up the purple and this way picks up the red, and that's how I'm getting that blended color, is that back and forth motion, and it does all the blending work for me without too much effort or having to go back and really play with too many colors. And then I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to add just a touch of the blue up at the top because the corners have dried a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little bit on top. And then I'll pick up a touch of that white and then come in where that blue was and the purple. So this is dragging the purple, this one's dragging the blue. And that'll give you those nice differences in colors. Just going back and forth over where those colors blend. If your color's dried and you wanted to get more purple, let's say, all you have to do is grab a little bit of the purple, come back over and add some of that wet paint to it in those brush strokes, and it should blend really nicely. So now with the, I'm going to grab a bit of the white with that purple, come in, and where the purple and the red meet, I want a little bit more definition. So I'm dragging that red, dragging the purple, making sure that I'm adding and blending those lines, adding just a little bit of white to it. So one of the things about the colors when you're using them, seeing as though here we can start seeing that the purples coming into that magenta a little bit, is that in color theory you have the primary colors, which is the yellow, the red, and the blue. And when you mix the two primary colors, they end up making secondary colors. The secondary colors are, when you mix red, the red and the yellow makes orange. And then if you have blue and yellow, it makes green. And then if you mix red and blue, it makes purple. And that's why if you go from blue to purple to red, often your eye will very seamlessly go through it. It's because there's a little bit of both of those colors in there. So those are the secondary colors. So you have green, purple, and orange. And each of those has a complementary color, because whatever color is not in that addition is a complementary color. So if we're going for purple, because purple is blue and red together, the third color that you haven't used is yellow. So whenever you put purple beside yellow, it's really going to pop. And that you can use to your advantage when you're doing some painting and you really want people to notice an area, is bring those complementary colors together. Like having some of that bright, bright yellow right beside that purple, and then those clouds will really pop. So if I were to do red and I wanted a complementary color, if it was a red painting and you want something to pop, you could always use the green, like a nice tree or something like that, and it will allow it to just jump off the canvas and your eye will go to it right away. And there's a whole science behind why that happens, but that's probably for another day. So I'm just doing the same in the water here, not as much as I did up here with the blending, just because I want it to stay a little bit quieter as the reflection and doesn't need to have quite as many details. So I'm just smoothing out some of those brush strokes horizontally in order not to have too much movement down here, because I have a lot of brush strokes. See here, you can see that the blue, as it's dried, the different brush strokes have stayed on there. So I'm just going to add another coat, add a little bit more blue in order to even those out and make them a little bit more horizontal. There, something like that. Let's wash that brush off. And now I'm going to come into and use the 1-inch, and it's a rounded brush, and I'm going to be able to highlight some of these clouds. So one of the things that you have to remember when you're doing clouds, remember where your light source is, because the rays of that light source, so let's say that, oh, not a purple sun, we'll go and get a white sun. So say we have that white area where the sun is setting, and we want that to be there. Those rays are going to come out straight, and whatever it's going to hit, that's the area that's going to have the highlight. So in this case, the highlight's going to be at the bottom of those clouds. So everywhere that I have a couple of those dark clouds that are coming in, I'm just going to run a little bit of white underneath, and then I'm going to come in with the yellow in a bit. But what that'll do is it'll give it a little bit of dimension and show that there's, you know, the different areas that the light is hitting. So wherever you have that cloud, the underneath of it can have those white highlights, and then that'll just help create that perspective. And then at the top of each cloud, now I'm going to take whatever color it is and make sure that I have that dark top. So here's a purple cloud. I'm just going to add a few like semicircles, a couple of bubbles at the top, just to show that there's a little bit of substance. And I'm making the bottom of it flat for these clouds. So here's that purple, and I'm just going to add some of those dark areas at the top, because the sun will hit the underneath, the top will be in the shadow. So I'm just going to add some of that dark substance to the clouds. And here I have the red clouds, so I'm going to come in and add some of the red to it. On this side, a nice red to balance it out. And then the last piece I'm going to add is a couple of those dark blue clouds here. And because I didn't highlight underneath, I'm just going to add a little bit of the white to highlight some of those areas. There. That's not too bad. Now, to do the same at the bottom, I'm going to grab a little bit of that white, start making those areas. And again, those reflections need to be nice and horizontal, parallel to the bottom, because otherwise if you make them tipping one side or the other, it's going to look like your water is going to be tipping out of your painting. So wherever there's lots of white from the sun, the reflection's going to have that white. I'm just doing the short brush strokes to give the impression of a little bit of waves in there. And then I'm going to go right into the colors. So add some of the white with the pink and the magenta. Wash a bit of that off. Go into the purple. And it has just a bit of white still left in my brush, and that's going to work okay for me because it just adds a bit of the highlight, so nobody knows if it was supposed to be purple or blue. So we're just making sure that it's horizontal. I'm not too worried about the colors and the reflection. You can spend days and days working on reflections and how you want it and how it stretches out depending on the perspective of where you are. But generally when I'm just trying to get some color, I like the color on this painting, so I'm going to really work at getting a nice color balance to it and not worrying about too much of the realism of what these waves are looking like down here, because I think what we might end up doing is throwing a dock on there. So now that we have more or less the reflection, we've got some of the clouds and they're highlighted, we've got the shadows in there, I think what I'm going to do is create that horizon line. So a horizon line is where the air meets the land, or the sky meets the land. So what we're going to do is pick our spot, and let's say I'm not crazy about how this edge turned out, so I'm going to come in with my black, and we're going to cut it right across there. Gotta make sure it's fairly level. And then I'm gonna come in like that. So that now all of a sudden, this is very clearly what's in the sky. This is the water. I'm going to come in, do a quick, with my brush now vertical, I'm just going to do a really quick tree line. Just moving it over, up and down, pushing in order to get those. I'm not worried about the bottom as much as getting those treetops. And it's more or less adding these together so you can have the, but instead of them being all the same height, I move my brush around, up and down, kind of like a heartbeat, but trying not to get it too uniform so that it doesn't look like it's a picket fence of trees or a tree farm. That's much more man-built in the back there, that it's still a forest with nature. So, and maybe, yeah, we'll keep it going all the way over to the end. Then we'll add in some. So, the really quick way to make that tree line, again, just grabbing that black and rubbing that brush, making those little vertical strokes, making sure that you have those treetops, because that's what people will notice, especially with the silhouette of having that black against the yellow and the white right here. So when you have the black there, and if this is the reflection, then I'm just going to take my brush, I'm going to drag it, because the paint is wet, I'm going to drag it down, and that'll give me that reflection. Wherever the trees are higher there, I'm going to try and get some of that same shape in the water. Just by pulling that wet paint down a little bit. And then I'll just quickly kind of give that back to the where that land line is. And now we have a reflection and the horizon line. I'm going to wash some of that off because I think we can go in and add a dock in here. So one of the interesting ways to make a dock is that it doesn't have to be a silhouette just black. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to use the same colors that I used before. So the dock, we're going to make it pretty big down here. So I'm just going to use the blue first. And then I'm going to start picking up the purple. And as I go towards the vanishing point, it's going to get smaller. But I'm going to play with the color. And you'll see it when I add the highlights a little bit more. So as we're doing perspective, it's going to go towards the vanishing point, which is right about there. So I'm making sure all my lines line up diagonally to there. I'm going to start adding a little bit of the white to it. And whatever your boards are, make sure that they're getting a little bit thinner. So these boards are going to be thicker, and as you get closer to that vanishing point, they have to get a little bit thinner too. So your lines should be getting that much thinner as we're going. And as we, so I'll fix these up in just a second. I'm just going to get the basic shape of my dock. Now I can grab a bit of a detailed brush. I'm going to come in with some black on the back end of those planks. I'm going to add in some shadow with the black paint. Just to give it that shape. So wherever I had those lines, it'll actually fill in a few of those spaces. And then the front of them, I'm gonna use my detail brush, the itty bitty one. I'm gonna come in with a bit of that yellow and the white, a fair amount of water to get a really nice thin line. And then I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna start really getting that detail of working in how big those boards are, what direction are they going. And you'll see that the lines, as I get closer to where the viewer is, that's where those lines have to get bigger. Now the trick to doing this is to always match up on both sides where those boards are and how big they are. Because when you come in and do that horizontal line now, is to try and, that's the tricky part. So these ones are very close. And you don't have to get right across because the light's not going to hit the whole way. So don't be afraid when you're doing something horizontal that you don't have to go the whole way across. Even if you just give the impression of there being the light that's hitting it on this side, it doesn't necessarily have to join on the other side. And that's a way that you can worry a little bit less about how you're getting your lines to match. Just gonna work on a bit of shadow from the water, and on this side some of the reflections, and just like that you have your dock in your multicolored sky. Just adding a few water ripples there. And then, just like that, we're done. So you can keep on working on it and adding some waves and some trees. You can add a silhouette or something like that easily with the black. So I hope you have fun with it and try it out. And I'll see you next time on Painting with Yuk-Sem.